Welcome to this Executive Explainer. If you're an MBA student, a senior executive, or a certified management accountant gearing up for the CSCA examination, you are absolutely in the right place. Today, we're going to approach this material a little differently. We aren't going to be passive readers. We're going to put ourselves in the shoes of active strategists making high-stakes decisions. Let's get right to it.
Think about this for a second. We're going to kick things off by challenging a really massive fundamental assumption that tends to trap novice managers and frankly sinks a lot of CSE candidates. The question is, within the exact same industry, do all companies compete against one another equally? Now, the knee-jerk reaction for a lot of people is just to say, well, yeah, of course, if they're in the same industry, they're all fighting over the exact same dollars. But as we're going to see today, that assumption isn't just a little bit off, it's dangerously incorrect.
Here is our roadmap for this session. We'll start by breaking down the core competitive illusion. Then we'll move into mapping the battlefield, navigating mobility barriers, look at some real-world executive scenario case studies, and finally, wrap it all up with a final executive review.
All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, the core competitive illusion.
So, what exactly is a strategic group? Put simply, it's a cluster of firms within a specific industry that compete using highly similar approaches. Maybe that means they have similar pricing structures, similar product quality, or even a similar geographic reach. These firms, they are your true rivals. The absolute crucial point here is that competition is almost always strongest among firms that share similar business models, not just anyone who happens to be operating under the same broad industry umbrella.
Now listen closely, because this is a major CSCA exam trap. Do not, under any circumstances, confuse your customer-oriented market segments with your competitor-oriented strategic groups. Industry segmentation is all about dividing up the market to answer one specific question: who do we serve? Strategic groups, on the other hand, are competitor-oriented. That concept divides the firms themselves to answer the ultimate survival question: against whom do we actually compete?
Moving right along, let's get into Section 2, mapping the battlefield.
You know, you really can't just group companies together based on a gut feeling. You have to analyze your competitors along some very specific dimensions. We're talking about things like, are they a premium brand or a low-cost alternative? Do they have local, regional, or completely global geographic coverage? Do they sell their products through physical retail stores, or are they entirely direct-to-consumer online? What's their degree of vertical integration? These specific dimensions, they essentially act as the core coordinates for our competitive map.
And when you take two of those really meaningful dimensions, let's say product quality on the vertical axis and price on the horizontal axis, and you start plotting the firms, distinct clusters will emerge. Suddenly, you aren't just looking at individual companies anymore. You start to see crowded, hyper-competitive blood-red oceans. And perhaps even more importantly, you spot the wide-open market gaps where absolutely no one is currently playing. That's where the opportunity is.
Okay, let's shift gears to Section 3. Navigating mobility barriers.
Now, you might be wondering, why can't a company just move into one of those open market gaps? Well, there are invisible walls out there called mobility barriers, and they make it incredibly costly and difficult to just jump from one strategic group to another. You literally can't just wake up one morning and declare, hey, we're in a different strategic group now. You are going to be held back by things like massive capital requirements, deeply entrenched customer loyalty, highly specific proprietary technology, or really complex distribution networks.
Let's put our strategist hats on for a second. Think about a budget airline that suddenly decides it wants to pivot and become a luxury carrier. What challenges do they face? A budget carrier like Ryanair or AirAsia can't just casually start competing with Qatar Airways or Emirates tomorrow. Overcoming that divide requires massive amounts of capital, completely overcoming a brand image that is strongly associated with being cheap, and entirely revamping their service capabilities. They're dealing with completely different customer expectations and service infrastructures. The mobility barriers there are just staggering.
Let's see this in action with Section 4, Executive Scenario Case Studies.
Look at the smartphone industry, for example. A top-tier consultant rarely asks something as generic as, who are the competitors? Instead, they ask, which strategic groups dominate? On one side, we have Group A, with Apple and the Samsung Galaxy Ultra. They're characterized by premium pricing, cutting-edge innovation, and fierce, almost cult-like brand loyalty. On the other side, Group B features brands like Xiaomi and Oppo, whose entire strategy is driven by affordability and value for money.
So let me ask you, do Apple and Xiaomi belong to the same industry? Well, yes, but do they belong to the same strategic group?
Absolutely not. Even though they're making similar physical products in the same broad industry, immense barriers like Apple's closed technology ecosystem and deeply entrenched customer loyalty keep them completely separated. Xiaomi faces a monumental mobility barrier in brand strength if it tries to just jump directly into Apple's premium territory.
And we see this everywhere, across literally every industry. Whether we are comparing the premium high-touch service of Emirates against the no-frills, low-fares of AirAsia, or the high-end luxury of BMW and Ferrari against the reliable mass-market dominance of Toyota, or even Amazon's massive global e-commerce machine against a local physical retailer, the exact same strategic clustering applies. I mean, even Starbucks is in a completely different strategic group than your local corner cafe, even though at the end of the day, they are both selling you the exact same caffeine.
So to avoid completely misallocating your company's resources, you really have to elevate your thinking. Isolate the true direct rivals that are threatening your specific market position. We call this the consultant's mindset. Stop looking at your industry as just one big homogeneous blob. You have to start asking, what specific dimensions define the competition here? Are there strategic gaps we can exploit? And realistically, what barriers stand in the way of us repositioning ourselves?
All right, let's bring it all together. In Section 5, Final Executive Review.
I want you to lock this golden rule memory technique into your mind right now. Step 1, ignore the broad industry label entirely. Step 2, cluster the firms by similar strategies. Step 3, clearly define the competitive dimensions. And Step 4, map out the invisible mobility barriers separating them. I promise you, candidates who think like true strategists instead of just rote memorizing definitions are the ones who pass their exams and excel in the boardroom.
If you're sitting for the CSCA exam, know that the examiners specifically want to see you interpret maps, recognize those invisible barriers, and clearly distinguish customer segments from strategic groups. Why? Because out in the real world, your strategic group directly dictates your profitability, the intensity of your competition, and ultimately your pricing power.
If you ignore these dynamics, you run the very real risk of severely underestimating your true threats. Understanding your specific strategic group allows you to accurately benchmark your performance and anticipate exactly what your direct competitors are going to do next. It keeps you focused rather than getting distracted by industry noise from companies that aren't even targeting your customers.
Before we wrap up, test yourself against these rapid-fire review questions. Think about your own company or an organization you're analyzing right now. Can you definitively point to the overcrowded, hyper-competitive red oceans on your strategic map? Can you actually name the exact barriers that are holding you back from moving upmarket or expanding your reach?
I'm going to leave you with these 3 executive reflection questions to ponder. Are you currently positioned where the true opportunities lie, or are you secretly trapped behind invisible walls you didn't even know existed? Bridging the gap between a generic, broad industry analysis and a truly surgical competitive strategy is exactly what separates average managers from top-tier executives. Thanks so much for joining this explainer, and remember, keep thinking like a strategist.